There we go. All right. Welcome everyone to session 37 of Beers with Engineers, which is a kind of a big deal, right? Means we've now been doing this for just a little over 3 years worth of sessions, which is a little crazy to even think about. Um, so it's really exciting. Really glad you joined us. And it's going to be a 3-year retrospective for us today. So just really quickly, we always put the safe harbor slides up here, but we're probably not going to talk about anything like too new in this conversation today, but just in case, um, we always want to make sure that we talk about it just so that we don't get anybody in trouble. All right, so why are we here? Um, well, just a little over 3 years ago, Will and I looked around and said, "Hey, um, we want to kind of build a community that's talking about the cloud native journey and how that lives in conjunction with ServiceNow. There's not a lot of um, there's not a lot of discussion around that at the time, and so we thought, let's have those discussions, let's move things over and get the communication going. And here we are 3 years later. And never in our wildest dreams did we figure we would still be here doing this, and we wouldn't be here doing it without you guys. So we will just kind of introduce ourselves quickly. I am, of course, Mike Gallagher. I'm an ITOM pre-sale specialist. This is an old picture that will be updated soon. And I love all things technology. I always tell people that I have an invisible propeller. And I am a nerd in all things generally, right? I love board games. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I spend a heck of a lot of time with my family. And today I am drinking a Warlock Imperial Pumpkin Stout by Southern Tier Brewing, which is actually a New York brewery. But I absolutely love. They're like a staple of my Halloween time beer drinking. So, cheers to that. Will, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Southern Tier, they're a kind of a staple in this area here. A lot of their offerings at the just at grocery stores near me. Hi, everybody. I'm Will Hallam. I'm an ITOM solution consultant. Been doing different stuff in the IT world for like 30 years. Um, Lately, just focusing on IT operations management and specifically around automating various aspects of it. Just really, it gets those endorphins flowing for me to find a repetitive task, something that's very tedious, and automate it and take that toil out of the hands of people and let them do more interesting things. In my spare time, I like to hang out with my family a lot, play some pickup hockey and video games. And today I will be drinking a Brown's Brewing Company oatmeal stout from Brown's Brewing in nearby Troy, New York.
Nice. I love a good oatmeal stout. Oh, also, just side note, on the video game front, both Will and I have been playing this cool game called Unnamed Space Idol. If you haven't tried it out, check it out. It's fun. All right, so today we're gonna do something slightly different. Usually we go into a tech deep dive on a particular subject, and we get like really, really in depth on how it works, how it operates, implementation details, gotchas, all that fun stuff. But today we're going to take a look back over kind of the last 3 years of shows, what we've done, what we've talked about, what's changed in the technology. And then we're going to ask to be even more interactive than y'all normally are. You guys are awesome, but even more so because as we look at each of these kind of specific technology patches, We're going to show you what our wish list is for the future of that technology suite, and then we're going to ask you to add to it. And the wonderful thing is because we're recording, we'll get all of this in, in detail, and then we can share it with product teams as we feel like it's useful for them. So I think it'll be kind of a fun and interesting exercise. So as usual, please don't be shy. So, first and foremost, both Will and I just want to say thank you all, right? If you guys didn't continue to show up and support us, then we wouldn't be able to continue to do this every month. So, we wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. So, thank you very much. It's just kind of amazing how much fun this all has been. And the vast majority of the reason behind that is because of the community and all of you guys. So thank you very much. Keep coming. And when you see us on the knowledge floor, please stop us and say hi, right?
And speaking of knowledge, we have begun the process of trying to put another live Beers with Engineers event together for upcoming knowledge. So more to come on that, but it is in the works. So if you're able to get to knowledge, we can actually ply you with free beverages and food in person.
Right. And every time we'll get into a little bit more of that, but every time we've ever done that in person, it's always been just fantastic. So um, continue to continue to join us and start the authorization process now to get your tickets nailed down for Knowledge next year. In all seriousness, right, like the biggest change is I have decided no more Mohawk. I don't know. It may make a reappearance at some point, but for now, I'm like, it was starting to drift this way and it was getting poorly managed, and it's time for a shift. So, now you will probably see me wearing this hat significantly more often. Um, Big shifts. So let's talk about this is kind of an interesting story given the AI bent of our company now and where ServiceNow is pushing everything. Um, is that I looked at, okay, how am I going to kind of work through the process of doing a roll up of the last 3 years worth of shows, and what does this look like? And so I was like, you know what? I'll just use AI. So I actually just took Copilot and pointed it at the YouTube playlist and said, "Hey, give me a summary of all of these shows and the major themes and what the kind of big changes are." And it was actually pretty darn good. I was quite impressed with the output and then what it did. And then I used that output to really kind of build in some of the major themes and highlight some of the key episodes that we did and some of the key talking points that we've discussed. So these are kind of the four main themes that we've discussed over the last 3 years. We've had multiple shows about the service graph connectors and when they've gotten released and how they've gotten updated um, as the um, as the containerization process has kind of like grown and matured throughout the organization. We've talked a lot about what that looks like and how that's all gotten discovered. And we've actually even had some pretty in-depth conversations around container vulnerabilities, even though SecOps and security isn't either Will's or my wheelhouse. We kind of have spent some time talking about that and getting involved in it because it's very adjacent to all that we do on the cloud native front. So we're gonna kind of like walk through each of these, talk through some of these components, and then at the end, if we have time, we might actually show you something extra. So, um, first and foremost, let's talk about building and managing containerized mids. So the very first show was us talking about how to take a community image out there for a Docker-based mid server and build it and deploy it into a Kubernetes cluster. Um, And so there was, like I said here, there was no official containerized mid server image, and there wasn't any real support of containerized mids at all. And um, when I first started here, I was like, well, that's interesting, right? Like, how do I make that work? So, and actually, that was one of my early YouTube videos that I recorded as an SE. Was kind of like how to build this and deploy it out in an Azure stack. And so what's changed, I mean, this has been a huge area of change for the technology. There's now an officially supported mid-server image. It is totally configurable using standard K8s methodologies, right? Like you can deploy it in a YAML file, you can customize how it looks, you can you can pass in secrets into it and have it configure itself via those secrets. So it's actually a significant improvement. And one of the interesting tidbits that popped up for me when I was doing this review was that I think it was like the second or third show that we did was about a new capability to automatically deploy and scale containerized mid servers. And unfortunately, that capability has been deprecated, um, which I was kind of sad about. But I think really ultimately there was a fair amount of complexity required in managing that entire process. And all it did really was, and it wasn't really very utilized across the customer base. So,
Yeah, I, I think what happened was um, customers had either already or just decided because it was a light lift in like a Kubernetes world to create their
mhm,
own little orchestration
yeah,
or auto scaling to spin mids up and down. And so there just wasn't adoption of that out of the box capability.
yep.
Um, and I'm not sure, do you know, did they do anything to preserve the ability to have like a mid profile where when you spin a mid up, it kind of applies a boilerplate set of capabilities?
I need to go and confirm that because that was one of the things that I really liked about that capability, and I would love
Right.
to see that have survived. So, uh,
Yeah.
I'll
I mean,
go take that as a takeaway.
it's not like it's a huge lift to
Hmm.
create a little, subflow or whatever that kicks off and applies capabilities and extensions and stuff to a new mid when it shows up, but
Hmm.
that piece of it was kind of nice so that even if you were launching them on your own, if you had them set up for TLS and validation, it'd
Hmm.
be cool if it just kind of, you know, like if it's for container scanning, just have it apply that capability instead of because mid selection, it still bites us today, right? We were doing that
Yep.
cloud cost management exercise with RapDev for one of the episodes, and we couldn't get it to use the right mid because there's still subtleties for mid
Yep.
selection to this day.
Yeah, and that was another thing that I felt was a good call out that at least I learned about in that process was the TLS mutual TLS auth for the mid servers, right? Having that come up and automatically validate that mid server and have it already be usable without having to have user interaction to validate it is actually pretty huge. And that is completely separate from this auto deployment. And you can do that process with any kind of mid server wherever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that in and of itself is worthwhile. And if you haven't played with that or don't know how to set that up, there's a blog article that I wrote on the community site a while back, kind of talking through that. So if that sounds interesting, we can include that link out to everybody.
Nice.
So talking about kind of wish list, right? This is kind of pie in the sky for me, I know, right? But I would love to see a mid kind of decomposed into microservices so that way you could only deploy the capabilities and the code set that you actually need on a mid by mid basis. It's incredibly monolithic as it stands today. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, that was one of the problems that we had from a vulnerability perspective, right?
Yep.
Is the lack of being able to really lock it down in any kind of truly configurable or meaningful way, right?
Yep.
And while we went back and forth and had some of the issues resolved with ServiceNow, it's still a kind of an exception that we've had to carry for the last couple of years around
Yep.
really being able to only implement specific pieces of functionality, right? And trying to get maybe just the JDBC piece and the REST piece, but for some of the um, scripting and some of the other functionality has not having those, so we don't have that kind of those types of vulnerabilities or that level of focus on those and the scrutiny it brings. So, yep.
Yep. Totally
Yeah,
agree.
there's definitely like this cultural difference when it comes to containerized workloads versus just throwing something on a server,
Yep.
where just like, and maybe it's just because the latter approach is older, right? So just it's almost been it's just kind of been the way that scenario has evolved. Is you still have the ability, you get a vulnerability notice for something on a server, you kind of have some leeway to say, well, here's why it's not affected, because it's configured this, either it's configured this way or we block network traffic from here, there, or whatever. Whereas it seems like in general, containerized ecosystems are less flexible in that way, because the containerized workload is so granular. You've got a lot less leeway to say, yeah, we know, but we've just configured around it. It's more, you've got to, you've actually got to mitigate that vulnerability in the image. You can't just say, oh, we're gonna configure around it. At
Yep.
least not as readily.
Also, one thing that I should have added to this wish list is a mid-server image that is capable of having a read-only root file system.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's that's going in the deck before it gets sent out, because
Yep. Yeah.
that's kind of it's overdue, because that's
Yep.
kind of a standard now with container images.
Yep.
Is it's almost table stakes that you
Right.
have the ability to do a read-only immutable kind of root or whatever, and then
Hmm.
your your changeables. And it shouldn't be too hard, because it's already got the existing recipe has support for a volume,
Mm.
for a persistent volume. A
Yep.
PVC is in there. So if you configure that, then everything that should need to change should be getting symlinked over to that PV.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's like, why can't you just make the rest of it read only? And there's
That's
probably
it.
like one thing or something left over that hasn't been cleaned up. So yeah, that's definitely, I think that's kind of overdue.
Yep.
Um, and then the other thing I put in the wish list was Windows support, because, and um, I recognize, I get why they deprecated it. It was out there for a while. There was a recipe to build a Windows mid container image. The problem is those base Windows container images are just so huge.
Yeah.
And I suspect that it's the vulnerability thing again. There's so much in there. There's like impossible to get one of those that would scan completely clean, at least for more than 5 minutes from a vulnerability perspective. So it was just constant chasing, not to mention, a 3 gig container image that's just so far from taking advantage of, containers, that
Yeah.
I think it just never got adopted at scale. The problem is, if you want to discover or automate Windows stuff,
Hmm.
you got to have a Windows mid, right? So I just think that should be on a backlog somewhere to create some container image that's capable, whether that's adding, because PowerShell's available on Linux. Granted, I think it's PowerShell 7 is like fundamentally different. So it would be a big effort recognizably to go to, from PowerShell, I think 5 to 7. But I think it's still a worthy goal because if you could have lightweight mids that go and automate and discover your Windows um, footprint, I think there'd be a lot of value there.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it would be huge. Okay, time to open up the floor. Who's got wish list items for containerized mids that we didn't touch on?
Can I ask another question then?
Of course.
Since
Yeah,
nobody, so
always.
one of the outstanding questions when we had going through Now Assist, and you guys may or may not know this, was the lack of streaming support from the mids, and they said that they were looking into having it added. Do you guys know what they've done from a, I guess from a agentic AI standpoint to be able to use streaming? No.
I haven't looked at that. What about you, Will?
Not specific, but I know that the whole workflow data fabric thing is it's kind of maybe not quite as hot as the whole AI thing, but it's up there. And there's a lot of that kind of it's all about other ways to pull data in such that other than just kind of ingesting it into a table via REST calls. So I will make a little note here about it and
It was just
see.
something that came up with the MCP client, especially when we want them to be able to speak to or utilize our internal MCP servers, right? That there
Yep.
Okay,
wasn't a streaming capability to be able to kind of have a
just a
persistent
constant
connection.
flow. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than just something we get all the stuff back and then you have to kind of start it over. But yeah,
Yeah, it's more kind of batch,
Right.
like just an old fashioned polling
yeah,
kind of
long
thing where it's
polling,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, I mean there definitely is a lot of interest in tying external data into the platform without actually like running some job that like pulls it in. It's
Right.
more of like a dynamic. So like the external data connectors and the what they call zero copy
Yep.
connections. Um, there may be something adjacent to that that ties back to what you're talking about.
Mhm.
At the very least, there's folks internally we can ask to see uh, slash reiterate that Dave is still waiting for something like that.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep. Other thoughts? All right. We'll keep cranking. So, discovering and managing Kubernetes resources. I don't normally like to shorten it to Kate's, but there was no way it was all going to fit on one line, and I didn't want to totally like blow out the entire line. So, so when we first kind of started this process, like even before like this, when I first started at ServiceNow, the only way to discover Kubernetes resources was there was two patterns. There was a scheduled pattern and there was an event-driven pattern. And really, the event-driven pattern was just designed to run every so many minutes and be a little bit lighter weight. But it was external to the cluster, and you had to build a schedule on a per cluster basis. It was very, very clunky. Um, and so have been significant changes to that whole process, and you know the vast like difference between what we have now and what was there and available, A, when I started in 2020, and B, when we started beers in 2022, right? It's a huge difference. So, and like a couple of things, the first iteration of CNO, Cloud Native Operations, um, was incredibly large, and it used a full-blown mid-server image inside of the cluster. So it was heavyweight, it was a lot of space, and it had some cool capabilities. It had the ability to listen to east-west traffic, and it even had the ability to ingest metrics from metric sources within the cluster. But it came with some pretty significant security requirements and access requirements that made the security teams rightfully have their concerns. And in addition to that, over the years, we've also seen multiple different Kubernetes discovery options, and it really kind of turned into a very confusing landscape of which option is best and what should we do this and what should the approach be. And now I think it's, in my opinion, right? The default is start with Kubernetes visibility agent, and if there's some reason you can't do that, then let's start thinking about other capabilities. So I think just that kind of like having KVA as a really good, reasonable first choice really helps streamline the decision-making process. And then its new capability that we just kind of demoed a couple shows ago was the ability to make traffic-based service maps. It still needs slightly elevated permissions for that, but it's really significantly better. And because it's a lighter weight process and the way that it's deployed now, it's just light years ahead of where the original CNO was. And we just had to iterate and put the right focus on it. And I think the development teams have really made huge progress there. Um, so oops, I copied over the decomposition of the myth of microservices here. So be it.
Well,
Uh,
it's, you know, it's
we
Kubernetes related. So
Right. Yeah. So service maps from observability data would also be really huge, right? Like, well, I think you added that, like dive into that a little bit more.
yeah, so I was actually in a kind of a voice of the customer meeting last week with a fairly large telecom provider, and that was one piece of feedback that they offered was, you know, KVA is good for the infrastructure, but they've actually got tooling that's, you know, generating true observability instrumentation. And
Hmm.
that's going into whatever their observability tool is. I think it might have been the Splunk solution, but that's kind of, you know, immaterial. It's OTel, it's open
Hmm.
telemetry. So you've got kind of a standard format for that data. And, you know, where they're seeing a gap today is they'd love to take that data. And we kind of had done that when we had back when we had Lightstep or cloud
Hmm.
observability, right? Is we had written a service graph connector that was making specific API calls into Lightstep, um, and generating service relationships from that. And so wish list item, it'd be great if we came out with, if we added that either to our service graph connectors that we've got for the other observability solutions or something more vanilla that just takes some kind of an OTel feed. I know there's some work on the ACC front to add some OTel capabilities to agent client collectors. So perhaps something will come to light there along those lines. But yeah, so that's kind of what that's about is just like the idea, you know, the current options we have for service maps are um, still a little bit limited when it comes to containerized cloud native workloads. We've got tag based, but that only gives you a certain level of granularity as far as the relationships are concerned. And if you've already got all this data in the form of the observability um, instrumentation, it would be great to start creating pipelines for that to actually create very rich service maps.
Yep. And it would be a very real representation of what's actually going on inside of the app, right?
Yeah.
So,
And that was kind of a footnote to that comment that the same
mhm,
customer made was the east-west thing
yeah,
is that just, you know, probably because of the way it developed, our service mapping, the visualizations tend to focus on like a top down, you know,
yep,
top to bottom type of representation. And so that was their one of their asks was it'd be great if you could, you know, enhance the platform so that it more natively understands the fact that you've got a bunch of microservices that are just kind of peers of one another. They're not necessarily what you would consider a traditional parent-child relationship, which we
Yep.
take liberties with anyway in our relationships. We make up, you're the parent, you're the child, somewhat arbitrarily sometimes, but um, the idea of truly capturing the fact that you've got these microservices that are peers of one another, talking back and forth and just working together, as opposed to one is definitively upstream or downstream from the other.
I felt like KVA did a better job of that in the traffic-based maps. Um, but I still think, yeah, there's room for improvement there.
Yeah, I think, to a certain degree, and it's not like a customer can't create that in the platform, because we
Hmm.
let you create your own kinds of relationships, right?
Sure.
You can create your own relationship types. But
Ashton knows all about that.
um, so yeah, so it may not even be that heavy of a lift to just have some out of the box relationship types that reflect that. It would be
Yeah.
kind of that, and then ideally have it, you know, impact the way the universal or the unified map renders to
Yeah.
kind of show that as well.
Yeah. Like is a peer of, right? Kind of
Yeah,
relationship. It's an
yeah, yeah.
interesting thought. Okay. Let's hear it. What other wish list items would you guys have to add to this? How can we think about future making discovering and managing Kubernetes resources better? If you could wave your magic wand, what would that look like? One thing that I will call out that I have liked is the fact that we actually have Helm charts now for the KVA deployments. I think that's a big thing, and I should probably have added that into the what's changed because that seems relatively minor. But the fact that that means now that you can deploy it in like GitOps pipelines and do like a heck of a lot more with it, I think is pretty significant, right? Or at least more easily. And that's one thing that I would like to see is a little bit more clear, like documentation and delineation around like how do we build KVA into kind of like a GitOps management pipeline for cluster deployment, cluster like management long term,
Yeah, good call.
right?
I do like that they didn't until recently actually provide the Helm repo, so that you had the
Hmm.
option to just add the Helm repo. It was for quite a while after KBA first came out. It was the KB that showed you how to get the chart. It was just a
Yep.
direct chart
Yeah.
URL. So I
Hmm.
do like that they really are following kind of the Helm standard now, where if you want, you can just add the repo and do
Yep.
like the shorthand to install the chart, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, which is important. All right. And again, right, like if if you guys want to jump off mute and throw in your 2 cents, don't be shy.
Can I complain about something then? Just
Absolutely.
Of
just keep talking.
course.
So the one thing I will say is the KVA documentation, right, is very disjointed. Like trying to find something or get back to something you found before if you didn't save it, it's
Hmm.
difficult. Like the other service graph connectors are on AWS, GCP, right, Azure. They kind of have the page where the configuration is, where it kind of leads you to the documentation. KVA
Hmm.
completely lacks that. You have to go out right to the site and find the documentation. And then there's some disparity between kind of talking to Shreya and the service graph connector team, right, doing
Hmm.
KVA versus what's in the documentation. And so we ran into a couple roadblocks that were imaginary, just based on either stuff that we were told from the development group or the documentation that we got through in Azure. But it was definitely a more difficult task to navigate through it, but the actual implementation was very simple. And
Yep.
so I would say that whatever they can do to kind of shore up like some of the old CNO stuff, versus the KVA stuff, and then
Yeah.
trying to provide that as part of the install would make it much simpler because it seems to be a very easy, you know, informer, configure it, pipe it to your instance, and then you just get it basically as long as you've created a user with the correct access. But it seems it's the journey is more difficult just because of that.
Yeah.
But from our standpoint, the architects for Azure very much like the approach and implemented it, and we're working on it for AWS now. But
Nice.
Yeah. That's great.
yep,
That's a
it's a
valid
great
comment though,
solution.
that
Yeah.
the docs are a bit uh disjointed.
Well, it
Um,
caused us a bunch of churn of us arguing internally, then waiting to get a meeting with you guys, and then us
Right.
wading through stuff, and then people correcting me because they found a new doc that said something different than what I told them. Right.
right.
And so we worked through it all and it all worked great. But it
Yeah.
definitely was a little more difficult than it probably should have been. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, yeah, like there's at least like 3 or 4 KBs that kind of really get into the detail, which are referenced by the docs, but it's kind of like, okay, I'm on the doc site and I have to go over to KBs and there's multiple KBs and yeah, that's
well, there's
Yeah.
one that was like you guys gave, I think, some YAML, but they also said there was another ServiceNow provided YAML script, and then they asked me what that was. So then I had to go deep dive and try to find that. They found it before I did,
Mm.
right? And so it just became a whole bunch of fun of kind of three stooges of us figuring it out.
who's
So
on first kind of
Yeah,
thing.
right.
exactly, we
I don't know
got
if
it
I'm
all. It
third.
didn't take that much time, but it definitely was a little more complex than it probably needed to be. So
Yep. Yeah, just in general, we could do with docs that are a little bit more like step one, step two, step three, step four, right? Like,
Yeah, more
and
prescriptive and less conceptual would
yeah,
be, yeah.
yeah, that's my wish list
excellent.
too. All right, let's container vulnerabilities. Again, this is one that we dug into on a particular show and wasn't really in mine or Will's wheelhouse. But we were actually working with a specific customer at the time that was working through the process. And then we got actually connected up with the Prisma Cloud team and had a conversation around what their process looked like. And that to me was kind of a standout episode because there was a lot of like interesting real world use case data. We talk a lot about like let's actually get the data into the CMDB, let's get it populated. But like this to me was one of those outcomes. Like what are we going to do with the data? Well, we what we do is we find vulnerabilities and then we figure out how to go squawk at the right folks about fixing those vulnerabilities, right? So we've always had integrations with container tools kind of as long as those tools existed. From a response perspective, our connection with Prisma actually kind of like predates the container, kind of taking off. But as that's really kind of ramped up, that was one of the things that got added into it. And so that was kind of the primary methodology at the time when we were talking about it. There was no native container SBOM capability, and there was not a lot, at least as far as what I could see, not only within the documentation, but also in the community. There was not a lot of good understanding around how those container vulnerabilities got ingested into the platform and where that linkage was to the actual containers that were deployed and what that looked like in the wild, right? And so, what's changed is there's a lot more documentation around that now. We've actually added in a native, I would say, is native is a little bit tricky there because it's still using a third-party tool called Trivy, but that tool is free. And we kind of walk you through how to actually use it and build out a mid server that includes Trivy, and we'll build out and generate those SBOMs for you. And so that's kind of a net new thing. And in addition to that, we've added in another integration with another container vulnerability scanning tool which is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the market, Wiz, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay Prisma Cloud, but Wiz is definitely a big name in the space. So um, adding that integration in is pretty significant. And actually, in preparation for the show and kind of talking about it, I went and looked at our container vulnerability response documentation just to kind of like refresh it in my mind. And it is the capabilities that it has available now are significantly improved over what we discussed. I think it was in 2022 when we talked about this show originally, maybe 23. And it's significantly improved. You know, we've added new integrations. It's much more clear how that gets ingested, where it gets built, and how it gets deployed. So this to me is another one of those big things. Again, it doesn't live in my wheelhouse. I'm not a SecOps expert, but I really think that this is a wonderful outcome that lots and lots of organizations are trying to achieve. And you know, that's why it takes a village, right? Like it takes all of these different data platforms and all these different capabilities to come together and provide all of the information around how to manage and achieve this outcome. And it's really powerful that we have this capability. So for, for like wish list items, this is a great call out, Will. You know, we kind of have that already with the service graph connectors, but we
Right.
the scanning somewhat fails on a semi-regular basis for various
Yeah.
different
Well,
reasons,
you got
right?
this table, right, that shows you the status of the scan for every, there's a record for every image in the image table, and it tells you, and sometimes the error message that kicks back is not super intuitive. And so that's what I see as kind of a piece of the process that's still got some friction to it, where okay, you set up to do your scans, and we do support authenticated repos now. Initially when it came out, it was only kind of out of the box supporting non-authenticated um, repos. And actually, when we did the episode on it, I did kind of a proof of concept where you could add authentication pretty readily. You just do some Docker logins on your mid server, and then it could retrieve the credentials. But since then, we've added the ability, you just define some credentials in the standard credential table, and it will authenticate to various internal and um, as well as the major cloud providers, ACR, ECR, et cetera. Um, but even after all that, you get these errors, and that's like, well, why isn't this, why isn't it able to scan this image? Sometimes you'd have to go to the mid and run the trivia command manually and see what it kicks back, etc. And so now we've got these AI agents. It seems like that's one of the, a very good use case, because you could do a lot of stuff with AI agents. Where the rubber tends to hit the road is, are we just taking a definitive workflow and trying to have an AI do it, in which case the results may not be as predictable? Um, and in this case, I would say no, that's not the case, because you get all these different kind of responses from Trivy. And so maintaining a definitive bunch of conditional statements saying, well, if the response is this, then here's what you need to do, or the response is that, then here's what you need to do. That's kind of right up the alley of an AI agent, which can say, here's the error, here's what I recommend as kind of the step to remediate it. So hopefully either the community or our product team has that in their backlog to kind of smooth over that point of friction in the process that exists today.
Yeah, I love it. Other thoughts around container vulnerabilities? All right. Service graph connectors. This is another kind of like key core thing that we've talked about multiple times over the years. And when they first came out, it was, pretty small. Um, and the initial iterations of those public cloud connectors were very, um, minimum viable product.
That is fair.
And they've had significant improvements. And now, right, we've have, significantly more Service Graph connectors over the years. This AI-driven troubleshooting is a really big piece, right? That's in Service Graph Connector Central now, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so you can go in there and it gives you feedback on what's going on with it and, provides you some more information around troubleshooting your connections. It's as, for those of us who are managing platforms with significant amounts of data coming in from Service Graph connectors, it's a really, really powerful tool. Um, the the Service Graph connectors for the various different cloud providers are getting to the point where they're getting to feature parity with the traditional cloud discovery pattern capabilities. Um, so that's a big thing. Multi-instance support is also great, right? The ability to kind of tweak and tune those to have multiple instances available. And then, of course, the Service Graph Connector Central, which is now kind of intended to be the one-stop shop for managing and building and deploying all of those um, Service Graph connectors in your platform. Really, really helpful. Will, what about your wish list here?
Um, yeah, just to continue converging those cloud disco options because that's one of the constant questions we get, and the answer's still a bit convoluted. We've got like Venn diagrams and flowcharts and matrices to try and guide people. Well, if your environment is like this, but you've got this and you want to discover that, then here's kind of the best cloud discovery option. So I
Mhm.
think, the fact that they've started converging things, especially in AWS, where now they've got the systems manager capability to run patterns. There's also, so I don't want to, just because I didn't want that safe harbor slide to go to waste, I will say that something that's in the works is something called mid as a service. So one of the big kind of factors that would drive a customer to using a service graph connector versus just native regular cloud discovery was, well, we don't want to stand up a mid. Um, they are working on providing a mid server specifically to support cloud discovery as a service. So you don't have to spin up a mid in your own network or in your own public cloud account, just like we've got just like we've got your instance running in a ServiceNow data center making API calls. There's an offering in the works that will stand up a mid server to support those cloud API calls that ServiceNow kind of owns and maintains on your behalf.
Hmm.
And so I just want them to keep doing more of that as well as kind of go the other way. So like when Service Graph Connector for AWS came out, one of the things that people gravitated towards was the fact it just handed you CloudFormation templates
Yeah.
saying just deploy this to your environment and it'll set up what you need on the AWS side. And we still don't have that for Cloud Disco. We've got the best we have right now is there are some examples, quote unquote examples out there, but nothing that just comes with the tool that says this is everything you need. And it does two things. It gives you kind of an easy button as well as full transparency and an easy way for the cloud team to get in and say, well, we don't need this permission, or we want, or just to provide the transparency. These are the
Yep.
permissions that are being given. Um,
Yeah.
and
Right
so,
now, trying to explain that to a customer at times is really
right.
difficult because you're like, oh, you have to look at this and you have to look at that and you have to look at that. But with the Service Graph connector, it's like, here's the CloudFormation template and all the permissions it's requesting. Just go
Yeah.
review that. Let me know your thoughts. Right.
And yeah, that's another safe harbor item. The product team says they've heard that feedback and that is in the backlog to provide some out of the box infrastructure as code templates that can be used by cloud discovery, not just
Awesome.
service graph connector.
Yep. Really quick, Todd asked, will that be real time, the mid as a service thing?
Oh, like on demand?
Yeah.
TBD. It's
Right.
I don't think I even saw a rough time frame yet as far as like what quarter of 2026 they're targeting. It's pretty early days.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, if that's, something you're keenly interested in, share that feedback with your account team.
Yep.
The World Forum yesterday in New York City, there was some talk about this in the safe harbor context and everything, but they made it sound like the mid server as a service might queue stuff up for a little bit and then ship it to the instance so that it
Mm,
wasn't constantly bombarding the instance. It sounds
right.
like that was still pending, but they talked about some kind of a queuing up thing, that it wasn't going to be exactly real time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Which makes sense, right? The
Yeah, and I mean, we've got the event driven, and the event driven doesn't need a mid. So, oh, actually, I would put that on the wish list though. I would
Yeah, I was
say
just gonna
event,
add that
and it's not
event driven
necessarily
everywhere.
Service Graph Connector specific,
Mm-hmm.
but I got at least one inquiry as to whether the event driven could go through a mid, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of makes sense for a customer that wants to really have, very strict control and visibility into what's getting sent
Yep.
from their cloud account to their ServiceNow instance. So
Mm,
I would add that to the wish list too.
yep. Well, and a convergence too, right? Because my understanding is with the service graph connectors, like it's kind of hit or miss whether you've got event driven capabilities, right?
Yeah, it does depend on the provider. Like AWS, you can have event driven with Service Graph. I think the other two still rely on patterns.
Yep. So,
Were there any experiments done with the graph connector to bring cloud services or resource objects that are not out of the box supported?
I don't know that we have. To my knowledge so far, the Service Graph connector for Wiz is primarily only cloud vulnerability stuff and isn't actually adding components to the Service Graph connector. Excuse me, to the CMDB. Um, so I don't think so. Um, but that's a good question, something we can look at. And yeah, Todd, I would agree, right? The mid-service could be kind of like the ITOM Cloud Core Services, right? So that it kind of like spins it up and ingests that data and then shuts it down as needed. Um, good, great, great thoughts. Any other thoughts around the service graph connectors and wish list and things we'd like to see? Will and I keep adding as we go.
Hey, Mike, this is Mark Wormack in
Yeah,
Columbia.
good to see you,
Hey,
Mark.
one of the things that I just came across is we've been trying to get rid of personal cell phones out of our Intune service graph connection,
Mm-hmm.
and just found the code. But I know that there are dozens and dozens of people out there that are using service graph connector that are not really coders necessarily, and
Mm-hmm.
something like omit this type of data from the service graph connector, where
Mm-hmm.
somebody could put it in the the data stream, which is what I had to do for mobile devices,
Yep.
but having a slider to say omit personal phones from Intune import, because
Yep.
there are a lot of companies that require you to register your phone, even personal phone, with Intune in order to get MS off
Yep.
set up.
ServiceNow
But we don't
included.
want to manage those as CIs in our ServiceNow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can
Agreed.
I add something?
Go for it.
So one of the things, if you reach out, probably through your account team, but to Shreya and Narendra and the rest of them, we asked for something similar with containers. There's a
Mm-hmm.
way in the robust transformer. There's just a toggle button where you can toggle off a specific class inside the robust transformer. If you ask them, I'm sure they'll, like, I got a walkthrough. Click here, go here, turn the slider off, and you can turn those individual classes off inside the robust transformer. So
Huh.
Hmm.
Okay.
Good to be. That sounds like a really good documentation piece, or maybe even a blog article.
yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I had to get advice from the community. So that's always hit or miss whether, hey, this worked for me. Okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Yeah.
Yeah, Shree's team. Right. I mean, the one thing I would say about Service Graph connectors, right? The AWS and the GCP one were going okay, but when Shree took them over, I think they got a little bit better a lot faster because I think they shared their, discovery and pattern-based stuff with that team, and so a lot of the issues that we had around um, clusters and other pieces that we were having difficulties in the Service Graph connector, but weren't issues any longer inside the kind of discovery or pattern based. All of those things seem to get reconciled really quickly. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the duplication and other stuff that we saw faded away really quickly after that transition. So I can, give credit to you guys of really investing the time and making these things better. Some of us
Yep.
were glorified pro bono QA engineers for a while. And so gladly so to make this better. When Will was saying earlier that people question of having to stand up a mid, it's never a mid. It's 300 mids. It's 500 mids for 300 accounts and all these VPCs, and like a
Yeah.
lot of us don't want to have to manage that infrastructure.
Oh yeah,
and
for
either,
horizontal, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
Bonkers.
scale is crazy.
and
Yeah.
that's across one cloud provider, and so we were very much focused on making sure this service graph connectors worked for us, and so we appreciate all the effort you guys put into those. So
It's great.
Yep.
And we appreciate your help. So Chris, you wanted to chime in too. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. One thing that would be really helpful across the cut, we have 4 service graph connectors stood up in our instance,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably like it's too big of a complaint to say populate all attributes the same way.
Hmm.
But a couple of the really critical ones to help out our infrastructure teams can kind of be confusing. Thinking specifically of first discovered and most recent discovery.
Mm.
Because what we see is different connectors will either pass in that value from their source data, or that data gets populated from when the IRE gets processed.
Interesting.
And so like for example, we're testing out the SCCM integration right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really confusing is we say bring in all of our laptops and desktops, and SRE is, or sorry, the SCCM graph is smart enough to say, oh, even though I'm handing you this laptop through the payload right through the IRE payload right now, I haven't seen it in 10 days. So the most recent discovery is 10 days ago,
Right.
but the first discovered date is being populated via the IRE payload processing. So it's
Mm.
really confusing that how is the most recent discovery 10 days ago, but it was first seen today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
that's
and
valid
that's
feedback.
fair.
yeah, I've just seen
Yeah.
that inconsistency on a number of service graphs.
Yeah, good to know. We'll pass that on.
and Mike also, whoever put together the service graph central,
Mm-hmm.
they need a free beer on us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Even if you just have one service graph connector, I would tell people to load it because it just has so much information all in one pane of glass. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. And the Discovery Admin workspace is actually a really, really nice addition to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's
So we're
still
not just saying that because it has links to Beers videos.
right.
So that's the best part.
Good stuff. Okay. All right. So just a couple of quick things. Like, we've done now 3 Beers with Engineers sessions live in Vegas. And they have been fantastic every single time. We've had discussions on the cloud observability capabilities. We've had discussions from RapDev on their chat ops capability. Um, we've had, it looks like I'm falling asleep in this picture. It was because I was drinking too many White Claws. Um, and we just have had an amazing time connecting with everybody in person. This one here, and I don't know if a lot of people saw us in the bottom left corner there. We actually got to do a live show out of our New York office, where we got to broadcast it there. And there were some people there in person and some was broadcast. And we did it in conjunction with the Uncorking ITAM Excellence show, which was really, really cool. So it was a lot of fun. And please, if you can make it out, we would love to have you. Couple of like quick like behind the scenes things that I found interesting as I was going through and reviewing all of these things. Um, so Will and I have gotten to talk to and interact with development and product management like on a level that I never have ever been able to do in any other organization that I have ever worked for. Um, and in large part, it's because we talk to you guys and you guys provide us feedback, right? And so, when we bring that feedback back to them, they listen. So thank you. And it's part of the reason why it's so amazing that the show is so interactive and all you folks are not shy about raising your hand and saying things because it really helps us feed that data back to the teams. Like I said earlier, we've gotten to run 3 live sessions. We're looking to do our fourth next year. It's really exciting, and I just love every time. Um, it's also kind of an interesting point of note that you can see the evolution of the official corporate PowerPoint template over the years. This is the newest iteration. I think even when we first started, it wasn't even on the official PowerPoint template.
Yeah, I think that the first few were just started with some random deck that one of us had,
Yep.
which was already kind of out of date. So yeah, we've not always had the best brand hygiene when it comes to our slides.
Yep. Which is why we're a little like kind of like don't ask, don't tell with the marketing team. Um, so the other thing too, right? Like we have been improving our office setups over the years. I know Will, you've bought a new microphone and some new stuff. I've actually moved my desk into a better area and I put up the green screen. And like you go back and look at some of the earlier shows and like you can hear my furnace running in the background because I was like down in the basement. It was pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Production
Um,
values are definitely better than they were 3 years ago.
right. Um, and here's another interesting kind of fun thing is that like both Will and I commented like we've intentionally and actively sought out new and unique, interesting beers just to have something kind of fun and new to talk about, things that we probably never would have tried otherwise. So that's been
Yep.
really fun. I still sing the praises of that Colombiana beer that I drank on last month's show. That thing was top notch, probably one of the best beers I've had since the inception of this show.
Nice.
Yeah. Um, and then of course, um, I don't know if I'm getting better or worse, but I've certainly changed my professional development around public speaking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is definitely, just through the repetition. I think our format helps too, is that we've always wanted to have this more kind of conversational thing than we're just like reading from a script.
yeah,
And I think that practicing that has really just helped me in all kinds of interactions that I have, whether it's with customers or internal teams. Yeah, it's just been a tremendous help to just more confident. And I think personally, when somebody is speaking on a call and they sound like they're talking to me or conversing with me as opposed to reading a script, I just feel like there's a better connection. So being able to kind of build that muscle memory for me, I think has been a real plus.
yeah, agreed. So next session, we're gonna dive into AI Ops Leap, learning enhanced automation playbooks. Really, really powerful new capability where we're actually utilizing AI to analyze your incidents and start actually building out playbooks and automations on your behalf in order to automate the most impactful things. So make sure you go check that out and set it up. I believe we will. There's our site as well as the full YouTube playlist. We'll get this recording, get it up and on. And I think that wraps up show number 37. Thanks for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and pause the recording now, and then we'll do as usual and open things up for questions, comments, and chatting.
Yes, sir.